The prison population in England and Wales has reached a new high, which isn't ideal for the Labour government, who, as we know in recent weeks, have been talking a lot about increasing police powers, bringing in the full force of the law. We had the 6,000 police officers acting as a standing army during the riots. It's pretty much anything and anyone they can when it comes to bringing down the full brunt of justice. Record numbers of incarcerated people are in English and Welsh prisons at the moment. They are doubling down on this rhetoric of the authority and rule of law, but with no prison spaces left, ministers are now seemingly refusing to rule out the possibility of literally sending the incarcerated to Estonia in order to ease overcrowding. To be fair to the government, they have introduced the threat of jail to water company bosses as new laws have been proposed this week, although it might also just mean they're banned from receiving bonuses. We're not sure yet. It's a little bit of a grey area. What hasn't been explicitly said on the front pages this week, we have been talking about prisons being overcrowded and the need for a solution. Whilst the Labour Party solution is seemingly we just need to get more prison spaces wherever they are, there are other reasons behind this in terms of why we're facing overcrowding in the UK. The head of the Prison Governors Union, Tom Wheatley, said this week that what he recommends is not actually sending the incarcerated to Estonia, but a wider review of sentencing policy to address what he refers to as the sentence inflation of the last 35 years. What the PGA wants to see is a prison service that is properly resourced to manage the number of people being imprisoned safely, securely, and decently, not in overcrowded, squalid, or dangerous conditions. A lot of people get quite nervous when we talk about prison places and having to release prisoners. Having softer sentences, reducing sentences, it all sounds very woke, very concerning. We do actually have some stats from a 2023 report from the Prison Reform Trust that I think gives an important bit of context to this topic overall. Just looking through this, more than 40,000 people were handed jail sentences in 2022, but only 61% of those were non-violent. Not only 61%, I don't want more of them. That means over half of our prisoners are serving time for non-violent offences. However, we also know that prison sentencing is considered to be one of the worst ways to tackle the issue of reoffending. Out of 42% out of the people who've been released from a jail sentence in 2023, 42% of those are rearrested within the year. So we know that prison time is more likely to lead to reoffending. We know that there's a huge amount of people in prisons in England and Wales that are serving jail time, not for violent crimes. Davey, what do you think is the best next step?
Obviously, that's what we have to do. There's no point in changing things. We just have to keep threatening harder, and eventually that will happen. I think when we're talking about this, the big problem is this has been a known problem for a long time. The first time that something like this was brought up was there was a report released in 1991 called the Wolf Report, which is a response to the Strangeways riot. And that itself covered quite a lot of information about the fact that, there needed to be a stricter look at how we were sentencing people. And one of the big things it talked about was dealing with the conditions that people were living in prisons. There was an article this week about someone who's been arrested abroad for something and been sent to a Thai prison. And all the comments were saying that he's never going to see the light of day again, or things like that. It's all well and good. There's this justice boner that people have in the UK for seeing people suffer when they get sent to prison, and it doesn't work. One of the main issues is that since then, 2 more reports have come out that have warned about this kind of thing, and ultimately, there's no focus on de-radicalization, there's no focus on reintegration, and certainly there's no focus on recidivism. It's all about punish, punish, punish. But when you look at the kind of disparate sentencing between blue collar and white collar crime, even in the UK, it's bigger in the US. It's very clearly a massive problem.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing we were just saying earlier, the fact that there was the headline about water company bosses could face jail time at the same time. It's like, oh, wow, at least I guess it's not unfair. They're trying to arrest just absolutely everybody. When you actually read through, the other option is that it might just be their bonuses get taken away. Meanwhile, we have a government that's celebrating the fact that we could get people sentenced within the day. We're going to have a real quick turnaround trial for people. It feels as though people are just glad to see baddies get locked up or something. But we're now dealing with the prisons that there's no space left. How many people are we planning on arresting at this stage? It seems to be kind of counterintuitive. But the Labour Party did also say the reasoning that prisons are in such a state is because of the Tory government. They said it was Tory mismanagement. They were very surprised by the Tory mismanagement. I feel like they knew about the Tory mismanagement, but we keep being baffled by it.
It's weird, isn't it? It's like I feel like they weren't reading the same newspapers we were for 14 years that were pointing out in excruciating detail how bad the Tories were, and suddenly they're surprised with what they've been handed.
What's really strange with it as well is that the whole idea of sending them to Estonia, sending prisoners to Estonia, they said that the Tories suggesting that was a ridiculously bad idea when the Tories were suggesting it. But it now seems to be the case that we are not ruling it out as an option.
So, is anyone else picking up on a thread that's really strange? That when the Tories offer policy, it's bad and horrible and really nasty, and the red guys are evil, and then the blue guys, sorry, and then when the red guys do it, it's a really great policy and it's a fix to the problem. I feel like I'm just getting a sense of that, you know?
It's Schrodinger's Chekhov or something similar.
There you go. I
It's
think
Chekhov's Tory. There you go.
I think one of the weirdest things we've got, you know, like we've just seen these race riots, and there's people being put in prison for less time than eco activists who are warning us that the world is smoldering at the edges. And we've got, you know, like with there's this whole like fake news, if you want to put it that way, about like rapists' lives being ruined, and you know, like you can't even get them in prison, you know, and even if you, not only are they not going to prison, we've just seen one compete happily in the Olympics, and there's one running for the president of the bloody United States, convicted in a civil court. So I'm thinking maybe we need to holistically look at who's being sentenced for what and actually dole out proper punishments, and also put people in prison when they commit crimes. Just this weird idea I've got.
I think it's better to stretch yourself thin, as try and arrest as many people as possible at the same time, but don't really focus on arresting anyone. And then put everybody in Estonia. It's really frustrating because the reason that Estonia is even an option is because they have so many prison spaces, because they have such low rates of incarceration. I think it ties into what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with the whole extremism and misogyny. Misogyny is going to be treated as extremism. Everything, like we're going to treat everything as extreme or not a problem. We're not going to have a middle ground where we look at systemic issues.
I think that's the irony, though, because we say we're going to treat it as, but the treat is what we need to do. We have to start de-radicalizing. And ironically, the program Prevent that's supposed to de-radicalize people is just a program for being like, he's brown and sad, lock him up. It's just insane. There is no plan to actually deal with the root of why people are incarcerated in the first place, whether it's poverty conditions that necessitate stealing to be able to feed your family, whether it's, you know, like you failed to get an education, you've got long-term health issues. All of this stuff feeds on itself. And everyone's like, arrest the baddies instead of thinking, why are the baddies bad in the first place?
It's bizarre. I think it's very strange to me that we are in a place where having high conviction rates is very, very good. But also we are also getting higher and higher incarceration rates. There's a couple of messages in the chat that I think are really interesting, talking about the sort of systemic issues that are causing arrests, particularly when it comes to issues like addiction or childhood abuse. I think there was somebody in the chat who had said, Double D actually said, approximately 80% of prisoners are victims of childhood abuse. I'm in the business. I'm assuming that means the prison business. However, it's exactly that kind of point. It's the fact that we've had a society that's been crumbling over the last however many years. Do you remember the headline that was talking about shoplifting being on the rise?
Yeah.
It was shoplifting's at an all-time high. Why is this happening?
Mystery. We've been through a 3-year-long cost of living crisis, and suddenly, just out of nowhere, shoplifting's gone up. It's an absolute mystery. People just don't want to work anymore. That must be what it is.
I think they're not trying hard enough.
Or pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, they're not being arrested. They're not seeing enough arrests for it to properly be a deterrent. So we'll have to arrest more people.
Arrest them louder and harder.
We've got it. Okay, so that's that sorted.
Patreon.com, Turn Left Media. Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you, Turn Left.